As the battle between the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis progressed into the 90s, many third-party developers ended up making games for both systems as a way to make more money overall. Konami is no exception to this, of course. In Japan, Castlevania was already a multi-platform series, seeing that games released on both the MSX in the 80s, and later in 1993, the PC Engine CD would get Castlevania Rondo of Blood. That game will be a review for another time, because today, we're looking at the game released the very next year for that aforementioned Sega Genesis, Castlevania Bloodlines. Released for the Genesis in 1994, while it received critical praise both back then and today, it seems to me at least that this game is kind of a forgotten entry in the series. Now, I'm not going to pontificate over how this is a forgotten classic or is a hidden gem in the series. No. People know that this is a great game. What I mean is that compared to the other classic Castlevania games, this seems to not be talked about as much. I'm curious to see why that is, so let's dive right in. Compared to the other games I've covered, this has some really interesting development aspects. We not only have design materials, there are also a couple of beta builds that have leaked online over the years. The beta builds don't show anything too insane, just some unused backgrounds and some different bosses, really for the most part. There are also some fun regional differences too. For one, the game is easier in Japan than America, yet another game in this series where the Japanese version is easier. How odd. Even the developer said in an interview that the American version was, quote, the Tabasco version of the game. That's certainly a way to describe it. The title for the game we got here was Castlevania Bloodlines, but in Japan it was just called Vampire Killer. In Europe, it got the subtitle The Next Generation. There's also a lot less blood in the European version of the game, so I really don't think you should play it. I mean, the main subtitle for the game is Bloodlines. There should be blood in the game. One other interesting regional difference is the appearance of Eric Lecard. In the American version, they gave him more masculine facial features compared to the Japanese versions. God forbid we play as a dude that kind of looks like a woman. We can't have the kids see that. Just don't go looking at any band around the 80s or 90s where every other band member has an androgynous look. Know what I'm saying? Mickey Free is not a girl. Sorry. The really interesting stuff to me comes with the unused characters in this game. Besides our main characters, John Morris and Eric Lecard, two others were planned for development. First, there's Yoko Felnades. She was supposed to play similar to how Grant did in Castlevania 3, only throwing ninja stars instead of daggers. What's cool is that Yoko was kinda sorta brought back for Castlevania Aria of Sorrow for the Game Boy Advance. Her last name was changed to Belnades to make her a descendant of Sypha, and we don't see her climb any walls or ceilings like Grant did. But in a way, the character does live on in official material, which is pretty cool. I can't say the same about Bolt Erickson, though. This Thor-inspired hero was supposed to be the descendant of Amanda Belmont, who we never see in any official material, so all of this is debatably canon. And I shit you not when I say this, real-life Viking Leif Erikson. Huh? I mean, I guess that could work. The Belmont family dates back to the 11th century, but that's just an odd choice. Well, anyway, Bolt would have played pretty similar to Eric, although using a hammer instead of a spear, furthering the idea that Thor was the main inspiration for him. I think the developers wanted to do something similar to what Konami's other popular IP, Contra, did. That series also got a game on the Genesis, Contra Hardcore, and there you could play as 4 different characters with their own unique weapons and abilities. I'm guessing they didn't want to make both games too similar, or they simply didn't find those characters as interesting, so they were cut. That said, what is to be made of the characters we did get in this game? Well, let's dive into the plot first. The year is 1917. World War I has been raging on across Europe. In an effort to revive Dracula, his niece, Elizabeth Bartley, attempts to use the souls of the many dead people from the war to bring Dracula back to life. In step 2 vampire hunters, John Morris and Eric Lecard, who are here to put an end to her scheme. To do this, they travel throughout the continent of Europe to take down the many countries infested by Dracula's monsters. Now time to point out the elephant in the room. Who the hell are these two guys and why are they trying to do a Belmont's job? John Morris is a vampire hunter from Texas, and he's able to wield the vampire killer? Also, how is Eric going to be able to hurt Dracula? For all we know, he's just some random guy from Spain. Well, both men, believe it or not, have some ties to the Belmont clan. God, their family tree must be a clusterfuck. John Morris is a member of the Morris clan, and his familial ties to the Belmonts is why he can use the vampire killer. He inherited the vampire killer from his father, Quincy Morris, named after the same character from the original Bram Stoker novel. Quincy used it to defeat Dracula in 1897, However, since he wasn't a pure Belmont, the whip's power ended up killing Quincy, which is why we never see him in anything. The Morris clan received the vampire killer from Richter Belmont in the events after Symphony of the Night, so that's a story for another day. Eric Lecard is from another branch in the Belmont line, although he wields the family heirloom, the Alucard spear, as his weapon, which answers how he's going to even hurt Dracula, let alone kill him. Eric is here because he was informed by an old man about the Count's attempted resurrection, so Eric took up arms to fulfill his destiny as a vampire hunter. Fun fact, this old man was actually named in developer notes as Michael R. Belmont, another member of the Belmont clan we'll probably never see and is debatably canon. If you couldn't already tell, we're starting to get more into the deeper Castlevania lore, something that will probably get more expansive as the series goes on. I really find it fascinating, but I totally understand if you spaced out there and are just waiting to see how good the actual game is, so let's move on. Moving on to the gameplay, it's yet another classic Castlevania-styled game. If you choose to play as John, you pretty much play as any other Belmont. Unfortunately though, what was added in Super Castlevania 4 didn't really make it over to the Genesis. The multi-directional whipping got nerfed here, so now you can only whip straight down or diagonal up. Also, your fluid mid-air control is gone, so we're back to stiff jumps and all the problems those bring. At least jumping on stairs returned, but that's merely a consolation prize in my eyes. You can also swing on ceilings, like how you could swing on those hooks in Super Castlevania 4, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they ever mentioned this in-game. Like, I got to this point in Stage 3 where I jumped to my death a few times, just trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. I think the better character in this game is Eric. His spear has a way better range, and I feel like it's easier to hit those small enemies like Medusa heads with it. You also get a super jump, which I really like and is a way to occasionally take some cool shortcuts. I'd say if you're playing this game for the first time, you play as Eric first, and if you like the game enough, play it again as John. Now there are some unique things that this game does add though. First is the super upgrade. If John or Eric upgrade their weapon for a fourth time, it becomes a lot more powerful compared to before. The only catch is that once you get hit, you revert back to your previous whip upgrade. I really like this, it gives me more of an incentive to play cautiously and not get hit. Next is the super sub-weapon attack. Like in Super Castlevania 4, you have a separate button for throwing sub-weapons, which is the C button on the Genesis controller. By pressing up and C at the same time, you can throw a more powerful version of your sub-weapon. This is another really great addition, and I like how powerful these can be on regular enemies. You can wipe the floor with a lot of them. You can even use a more powerful mystical attack if you're on your super upgrade, and it mops the floor with anything in this game, some bosses included. Also, only 3 sub-weapons in this game, the axe, the boomerang, and the holy water. I mean, I'm fine the dagger isn't here, but I don't know, I kinda missed the stopwatch. Plus, my sub-weapon ammo isn't hearts now, it's these basic-ass jewels? It's a really odd, minor change to me, I don't get that. There are a couple other neat minor changes too, like being able to whip behind me even after jumping forward, that's such a nice thing to do now. There are also cracks in specific walls that show you that there's an item in them. Much better than the identical looking blocks from the previous games, if you ask me. I'm really upset that we reverted to a lot of the design choices from previous games. Like, getting ripped and whipping in 8 directions and the fluid mid-air control really sucks. Their removal reverts this game closer to its 8-bit origins, and that also can be said about this game's difficulty. I know, bitching about the difficulty in a Castlevania game is kinda dumb. Like, obviously it's going to be hard, it's a classic Castlevania game. Why are you surprised? Well, I'll be honest, I was surprised with how much this game kicked my ass. I was struggling immensely throughout my playthroughs for this review. I got pretty angry a couple times. It was odd too, I've finished this game before and I didn't remember getting killed like this. There are a few reasons why I struggled here. First is that these levels are freaking long. There are only 6 stages in this game, but damn it if it doesn't feel like it's double that. There are a ton of different set pieces and platforming challenges and mini-bosses that all combine to make these levels take way longer than anything that I can remember in the previous games. Even the bosses take longer to kill if you ask me. I'll be hitting some of them with a ton of my sub-weapons and my whip, only to realize like a fifth of their health is drained and I've still got a way to go before they go down. The bosses themselves though, actually aren't that bad if you ask me. I do really like a lot of them except for this gargoyle douchebag, seriously I hate this thing. The rest of them though are really fun fights, they just take longer to kill. Second, and what I see to be the biggest culprit in the rise of difficulty, is the continues. Now, in every previous game, you could continue as many times as you'd like, with the only punishment being that you restart the stage you were on. Here, you only have a limited number to continues, I think 2 or 3, and once you lose them all, it's back to the beginning of the game. I hate this change. I'm already getting my ass kicked by tougher enemies and a more limited control scheme, and now I have the looming threat of having to do all these long-ass stages over again? Combine that with how the endgame is structured, which I'll talk about later, it really shocks me how people were able to finish this game back in the day. Next are a couple of things that are more feel, if anything. I can't get John's timing for his whip attack down. Usually in past games, I'm pretty good at timing when my character will be able to hit a moving enemy, but here I struggle a lot. Also, are there just less invincibility frames in this game? It seems like when I get hit like 2 or 3 times simultaneously before I'm able to really adjust myself. These could very well be things that I'm just hallucinating, but that's just what I feel when I'm playing, and you know what, other people might not feel this, I could be wrong. What I also feel is that this soundtrack rocks. As per usual, the soundtrack is a great listen. The Stage 1 theme, Reincarnated Soul, is one of my all-time favorite songs in the whole series. It's the perfect introductory theme to a Castlevania game in my eyes. The Stage 4 theme is also a great song, and I mean all the songs are good, it's a Castlevania soundtrack. Also, here's a fun little fact. The game's soundtrack was composed by Michiru Yamane. This was her first Castlevania game, but many fans would probably recognize her more for her work in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. What's funny is that the beginning of Stage 2's theme, to me, sounds really similar to the beginning of the song Lost Painting from Symphony of the Night. Take a listen, tell me what you think. I realized this while playing, so seeing the same person compose these games is really cool. Other themes like the Sinking Old Sanctuary and Iron Blue Intentions would also be reused in future games. The stages in this game I think are really unique in their own ways. You'll travel through 6 countries: Romania, Greece, Italy, Germany, France, and finally England. They still follow a lot of similar motifs like the castle, a ruined city, and a clock tower, but being based in different countries, they stand out a little bit more to me. And also being on the 16-bit Genesis makes them look very nice overall. There are some neat set pieces though, like the big statue head in the Greece stage, the factories in the Germany stage, and the large gardens in the France stage that give those countries a nice little bit of representation. Like I even said before, Stage 4, the Germany stage, is also going to have a Zeppelin in the background, which I would have really liked to see. That would have been a cool little distinction. I like all the stages, except for 1.5 of them. I think the end of Stage 2 with this sinking water is really just too slow, if anything, and I get impatient. It's not too offensive though, if you ask me. Stage 5 though, the Versailles Palace, is very offensive to me. These plant things that swing around in like these crazy ass patterns are such a pain to deal with unless you have the boomerang. The room right after that with the assortment of knights is annoying, and this staircase just sucks to climb up. I hate the stage with a passion, but this is really just the exception here. I still, overall, enjoy all the stages, even the final gauntlet. Yeah, this stage is really long and there's a lot to deal with. The mirror and anti-gravity rooms are tough, but aren't the worst thing in the world. They still are certainly awkward to navigate, though. The gauntlet really begins with the death boss fight. Before you even fight death, you have to go through 3 revisits of other bosses, including that gargoyle I love to hate. At least before you fight death, you get restocked on health, which you'll be needing later. After you take down death, which isn't too hard of a fight, you go right into fighting Elizabeth Bartley. Now, to be fair, this fight is a complete joke. But then, right after that fight, you get to fight 3 different Dracula phases. All of this, the boss revisits, the death fight, the Elizabeth Bartley fight, and 3 Dracula phases with little to no healing pot roasts after the boss revisits from what I can find, is something that competes with the American Castlevania 3 for toughest levels in a Castlevania game. If you could play the Japanese version, it's still hard, but you should have an easier time overall. Either way, you're gonna be in for the fight of your life here. After the castle crumbles, as per usual, you get your character-dependent ending. Nothing too crazy here. John stops Dracula's resurrection, and Eric fulfills his destiny of being a vampire hunter. There are technically 2 endings for each character in the American version. The extra ending is gatekept behind expert mode though. It's not even really another ending, it's just an extra screen of the character and that's it. The Japanese version doesn't do this, by the way, and since that game is in all English for some reason, again, play that version instead. So, after all that, does this game deserve the forgotten label I kinda gave it earlier? That answer is a wholehearted no. Castlevania Bloodlines is another classic in the series. Even though there are a couple steps back with the mechanics of the game, it isn't severe enough for me to say the game is a bad time at all. This is yet another game in the franchise you must play. Thankfully, with the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, it's become much more widely available. Before that, you pretty much only had the Genesis version to play, and needless to say, the physical version of this game is a bit pricey. Well, no matter how you decide to play it, this is a must-play for the Genesis, like I said. I once again highly recommend it.